Greetings, everybody. Thank you all for arriving early. As you can see, the meeting's recording here. For anybody watching this on video later, we'll get the meetings proper started in probably about 3 minutes. In the meantime, everybody hang tight. Welcome, everybody. We'll give folks another minute or so to drift on in. I'm going to go ahead and screen test, make sure my screen share is working with you guys. Let's go up here for this. Would you guys mind giving me a thumbs up if you can hear me, and also if you can see my screen share? Awesome. You don't all have to do it. Thank you for the many thumbs up. Just makes me feel validated to see so many thumbs up. I haven't seen that many since Heads Up, 7 Up in 5th grade. We'll wait just another minute here, and then we'll plunge into this fun bath of SAT, excuse me, not SAT. This is not the SAT presentation, the essay writing presentation. Writing a standout college essay. Sorry, I've been doing SAT stuff all week for the 40% of people that didn't have their June test canceled. I saw a hand there, but there's so many people in the room that I don't know who it was. If you have a question, just unmute yourself right now. Fire away. Or type it in the chat, that works too. Perhaps that was just a hand raised like my SAT got canceled and I'm enraged. If anybody's curious about that, by the way, I'm super sorry that the world is a stupid place. It's really annoying that they keep doing this a year afterwards. The rest of the country is running their SATs fine, just like Los Angeles can't seem to get it together. I'm counseling people who are looking to try to take the August one to right before this Friday, this date on Saturday, go to the cancellation site update page on the College Board's website, just copy that, see which places got canceled, and then when you're looking for August dates, avoid those locations. Also, once you get it narrowed down to a couple, just physically like call the school and be like, hey, did you guys run your June SAT or did you run your last SAT? And if they did, that's a very good sign that they'll run their next one. I mean, I would like to think that everything should be good again by August, but who knows? Okay, Well, anyway, we're not talking about that here today. We are discussing essay stuff. Yesterday's overview session. I was not in a session yesterday. I think you want to probably reach out to the counselors about that. I'm assuming this was for a Miracosta thing. So I don't have that access. Contact your counselors. They can help you with any of the other videos. On that note, by the way, I'll make a mention at the end of this, but I'll be doing this presentation again for everybody, not just for folks at your school, coming up in 2 weeks on Saturday. In fact, there's a thing on our website. There's a free practice test and seminar page at pjtestprep.com where you can see the ones we're going to do upcoming. I'm doing one this Saturday about SAT, ACT. It's got a free practice test involved that you guys can still sign up for if you wanted. And I'll do this one again for the essay on June 19th if you're curious or anybody else wants to see it. Speaking of other presentations. But let's dive in, guys. Let me welcome you all to our session today. Oh, very nice. Thank you, Jane Levine, for the reference to that other document. So yeah, there looks like there's staff authority in this meeting as well, so you can chat them any questions as long as you address it to everybody. Guys, welcome. I'm Paul Jury. My last name is just like in the court. Feel free to make fun of it if you like. Some suggestions include injury, forgery, grand jury, perjury, or if I ever went to England and got knighted, I'd be surgery. I run PJ Test Prep, and I'm here to talk to you guys about the personal statement / essay / what the heck am I supposed to do now that there hasn't been school in 2 years and I can't take an SAT and I need something to get me into these really hard colleges. What can I do? We're going to talk about all of that today. Today's schedule is going to start with kind of an introduction to the background about these essays. Obviously, you guys know what they're for, but sort of the approach and angle of that. My main goal today, this is actually the perfect time for this. For those of you who are going to be seniors next year, my goal today is that every student in this meeting hopefully leaves with a couple of ideas of things that they could write about. I'm actually just finishing up a presentation I'm writing about, like, here's how to come up with 8 ideas for your college application essays. I would love it if you walked out of here with 8 ideas, and I'm going to do my best to push you guys in the right direction. Obviously, just 8 ideas about anything might not always be the standout essays you're looking for. So I'm going to talk to you in the middle of this about what these college application counselors are looking for and what you guys can try to do to help yourselves stand out. So if you like, you're welcome to turn on cameras. You don't have to. Obviously, I've gotten quite used to presenting to a bunch of Shrek and hockey logos at this point. I always do love the smile on somebody's face when they're humoring my bad jokes, but you're welcome to do whatever you want. Regardless, guys, we're going to get you guys ready to go. Thank you, Grace. You're the best. We're going to get you guys as prepared as we can and launched onto this ever important college application essay process today. So quick on my background. As I mentioned, I run PJ Test Prep. We're just a small boutique SAT, ACT tutoring and essay prep company based in South Bay here. Been in operations for almost 20 years at this point, helping kids get into college. So I have seen the whole gamut of, every different type of kid getting into every different type of school. And I love helping people have their college dreams come true. And nothing is better than getting the emails back from the schools that people got into or decided that they are going to and so forth. And that's a great season for us right now, even during a silly pandemic. The other half of my life, I spend writing. I actually majored in creative writing for the media at Northwestern, where I attended, and out here in Los Angeles, I've written for various TV shows that you've definitely never heard of, and for internet and stuff like that. So creative writing plus getting kids into college is basically like the Venn diagram overlap of the two things I spend all my time on. So I like to think I'm uniquely qualified to help you guys with this. I've also read thousands of these essays over the years and try to keep in touch regularly. I don't work at a college, but I have many contacts who read for UCLA and Northwestern and places like that. And I'm always trying to keep my ear to the ground about what they're into or not into in one particular year. So I hope I can help you guys with this. Let's dive right in. I want to talk first, guys, about some overall logistical things that I want you to keep in mind for this year's essay process. For those of you who are not juniors currently, who are younger, maybe you're a sophomore or a freshman, and you're just getting a really good head start on that, well, kudos to you. This stuff will be mostly useful as well. Frankly, not that much is going to change. Not that much has changed with the essay during the pandemic, other than that it's more important than ever in this world of, optional SAT scores, or in some cases of the UCs, they're not even looking at them, at least not right now. So these are very important. They will continue to be so even after maybe next year. Some schools will go back to requiring SATs and ACTs. But this is an important aspect of showing colleges who you are. And I think you know that because you're here in this meeting right now. Now, a couple logistical things at the bottom of this page. By the way, if you didn't get the handout, I can email you this afterwards. My email is right here. Well, actually, it's not. Paul@pjtestprep.com. I'll throw that in the chat. If you want a copy of the handout and you didn't receive it, I think they sent it out to you guys, but if not, just shoot me an email and I can send you a copy of this. But you can also just watch it on your screen. So first of all, this is maybe the most boring note I have for you guys, but I want to talk logistics for a second. For those of you who are going to be seniors next year, what I want you to do right after this is over and right after your finals is over is make sure that your college list is in a good place, because that's going to dictate what you need to do for your essays. There's no point in writing an essay if you don't even know what college you're applying to yet. I mean, that being said, you're probably going to apply to at least one school that's Common App and at least one UC. And so you kind of know what you can start working on. But make your list and then make a plan. And if you are doing, most of you guys, I mean, almost all of my students fit into the same category of I'm applying to a couple of UCs, but I'm also applying to a couple of not UCs. If that's you, I suggest, number one, work on your UC essays first. There's 4 of those, they're shorter. Those essays obviously are very important for the UCs, but since there's 4 of them, each one isn't as high stakes since you get to use all 4 of them together. If you do those 4 first, then you can use whichever one is turning out the best, or maybe 2 of them that are working well together to become your Common App or your coalition longer app essay. Then whichever ones you don't use from your UCs, and you don't end up using those on your Common App, those could be supplement essays or those could be scholarship essays. We want this to obviously be as easy a process as we can, in addition to being as quality. And I find that that's a pretty good order for achieving both of those goals. Note number 2, don't say what's already been said elsewhere on your application. This one, I don't know, both is in line with and defies common sense. A lot of people have this flagship achievement, like they're the president of the student body or captain of the water polo team or something or other, that they're like, oh my gosh, this is super impressive. I definitely got to make a big deal of this. You don't have to write your essay about that. In fact, it's almost sometimes better not to, especially if there's not really a story there. Isn't it more baller to just be the president of the student body and it's on your activities list and maybe one of your references mentions it, but you don't even need to talk about it because you got a cooler essay topic that you want to cover? So, consider, if you have something that's super impressive, are you adding anything by writing a story about it? Is there even a story there? If not, maybe use your essay for what it's actually supposed to be for, which is conveying something that isn't elsewhere on your application. No matter what approach you pick, make sure, of course, that it's a piece of good writing. Get help with this process. You are not going to crank this out in one sitting, in one draft, without showing it to anybody. Obviously, I'm here to help if you need, but so are your parents, so are your counselors, so are your teachers. The earlier a start you get on this, the more people can give you feedback. I honestly don't think I've ever seen a top shelf level essay occur in less than 3 drafts. So if you have some idea that you're going to just crank out Shakespeare in one sitting, no, Like you could make an okay essay, but not the one that's going to get you into that school that wasn't going to let you in otherwise, but now they're going to. So make sure that it's a good, solid piece of writing. You've gotten help with all these steps. And finally, give them what they want, but not at the expense of showing who you are. I'm going to tell you guys 6 stories today. And I hope that these stories inspire you to, come up with some ideas from your own life that, oh yeah, that sounds like the kind of essay I could write. Yeah, that reminds me of this thing that I did. But they're not all going to mirror image with you. When I'm giving these presentations, I'm always torn between like, there's not like a Mad Lib format of like insert this noun here and this verb there, and then you will have a perfectly crafted college essay. That's not how it works. There's multiple ways to write a good essay. But if I'm just write about yourself and how you're special, that's like vague, useless advice that what do you want me to actually do? So I'm trying to find the middle ground here, and that's what these 3 approaches I'm going to talk about are for. But if you hear an essay that you thought was a cool essay, but it isn't you, that's okay. Don't do that one. That isn't you. You have to find the ideas that reflect who you are. You can't fake this. Colleges are going to know if you're trying to do a gimmick that isn't you. Sometimes I'll tell you an example of a funny essay later. Sometimes people hear that and they're like, oh my gosh, that basement essay was so funny. Like, should I do that? Should I write a funny essay? And I'm always like, well, it depends. Are you funny? Because if you're not, oh, for the love of, oh, please don't try to write a funny essay. So agonizing for everybody involved. Find who you are, execute that while keeping these things in mind, and you will be just fine. One final topical note that I have to cover this year, at least. Hopefully I will never have to cover this again. Probably I will though. Should I write about COVID? Can I write about COVID? You can. Should you? No. Well, it depends. Okay. Do not write about how your junior prom was canceled. No one cares. I mean, I care because that sucks. You had that nice dress picked out and everything. But like these college admissions counselors do not care about that. The worst kind of college essay you could possibly write would be something that everybody could write. And that's exactly what the pandemic is. Like literally everybody could write about how this dumb virus has impacted them. Now, that being said, if the pandemic was just like a backdrop for something that isn't really about the pandemic, like how you realized you wanted to get into epidemiology, cool. Or you taught yourself Japanese during lockdown, awesome. I mean, those would be good ideas because those aren't really about the pandemic. That's just the springboard into those. And that's fine. Although I do think that Japanese epidemiology essays might be more common this year. Anyway, keep that in mind. You're always trying to think, what else are they going to see? And they're definitely going to see a lot of like, man, it was so hard to do Zoom school. Like, they don't want to see the word Zoom school probably in your essay unless it's about to go someplace different than that. Okay. So let's talk about what you actually should write about now that we've covered a couple things that I want to work around. And I want to talk to you guys about the 3 approaches that I've found in years and years of reading terrible essays and great essays and everything in between that is helpful for you guys as you're coming up with your ideas. And it all goes back to one of the first rules of writing, which is to know your audience. Now, with your college essay, your audience is this guy. Well, to be totally honest, it's a little bit more demographically likely to be a little younger than this and probably female. But anyway, whoever's reading this definitely has the same like soul sucked out of my body look in their eye. Like I've read 50 billion of these and they're all terrible. And like, I just want to, why did I take this job? I can't. I should have been a librarian. You have to think who you're writing for. If you're writing a thank you note to your grandmother, that's got a different tone and style than if you're writing a funny email to a friend or if you're writing a chemistry lab report. You got to think of who you're writing to. This person has some concerns. Number one, another valedictorian. My God, I just wish I could read about an essay of somebody who's a little different, not like all these other kids on the page here. This is also my 5,000th application today. I wish I could read something interesting. Then again, if I can get that kid who's going to make big waves on campus or out in the world, maybe my boss will finally give me that raise. Each of these little thought bubbles here reflects one of the three approaches that we're going to talk about. Of course, it has to also be a piece of good writing. This one kind of goes without saying, like, obviously you're going to make this not full of typos and not a first draft that's just one giant paragraph. That goes without saying. But let's talk about three approaches you guys can take to address this guy's other concerns and how to keep that in mind. Approach number one that you can take in drafting your college application essay is called be impressive. Sometimes we call this make waves. Basically, this is in a way the most cynical of all of the approaches. It sort of just remembers that colleges are just businesses. Like, colleges just want people to pay a lot of money for their product. And the way that they can charge a lot of money is if they're really ranked high in the US News and World Report and everybody's heard of their college and, oh my gosh, I really want to go there. Well, how does a school make itself go up in the college news and world reports? Well, it helps if your sports team wins a championship, sadly. But other than that, this is really cynical and horrible, but like one of the main things that makes a school jump in the rankings for those dumb magazines is alumni donations. Alumni donation, what, like, because some rich guy gave like $1 billion to our school, like suddenly we're 5 spots higher? And what kind of sense does that make? Well, in a way, I'm not defending this, but like, what should college be for? Shouldn't it make you successful? And also maybe you had a good time while you were there. So like, what other more clear measure is there than how much money you then gave back to the school? I'm not saying that's right. It shouldn't be that way, but that is something that they're always thinking about. They're like, how can we get ballers to come here? How can we get kids who are going to crush? Like, any old kid can just get good grades in college, and get some job. Colleges want to find bigger fish who are going to go out in the world, like, make waves. They're going to invent Facebook. They're going to win an Oscar. They're going to start a company or something like that. Their jobs kind of depend on it. Now, you can't just say, I'm going to go create the next Facebook, because, I mean, you're not. Somebody already did that. It sounds really presumptuous. You got to be careful of the tone with these essays sometimes. Also, Facebook's not even cool anymore. So, maybe invent the next TikTok. Is TikTok still cool? I don't know. Everything's going so fast these days. So suggest, don't tell me what you're going to do. Suggest the big things you'll do on campus or out in the world by talking about what you've already done. The core of these essays usually comes down to, I did this thing that most people haven't done. Now, you don't have to have won an Oscar. You don't have to have invented a charity that, raised $500,000 for pediatric cancer. Maybe you just started a charity that raised $20 for babies with the gout. It doesn't have to be like the craziest, most impressive thing ever, but somewhere along the line, you did something that maybe not all your friends have done. It doesn't have to be like nobody ever did it, but just something that's a little bit more impressive. Now, in the spirit of show and don't tell, I'm going to try to stop telling and start showing. I've got 2 stories for you guys that come from this category about 2 students who wrote about things that they did that had this effect of making the counselor think, this kid might actually be sort of impressive. Maybe I should, snap them up before somebody else does. The first example is called, well, it wasn't called My First Play. That's just what I call it. Most of these essays don't have titles. But this essay was written by a student who was very into theater arts. In fact, they were into writing, playwriting specifically. They went to a school that had a really active theater program. Every year in the fall, they would do their big Shakespeare play, and every year in the winter, they would do their big musical. And then in the spring, they did this thing called the One Acts, which were a series of short plays that were actually written by students. Students would write these plays, they'd submit them to the super picky theater director. The director would then choose the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 plays that would get selected. They would assign them to student directors, and then they'd, of course, cast student actors in them and present them all in this big fun festival at the end of the year. And it was this crazy thing. So this student sees this as a freshman in the spring, and it's like, oh my gosh, I got to do that next year. I got to write a play and submit it. Only problem is I have no idea how to write a play. So sophomore or the summer between freshman and sophomore year, they went off and taught themselves playwriting, got a bunch of books, read a bunch of plays, taught themselves the format, and wrote their first ever play, this silly comedy about a kid who gets a time-stopping device and stops time in the school lunchroom at lunch and causes all kinds of silly havoc. Anyway, the essay opens with this hot, dark auditorium where this character, this author, is sitting in the carefully selected aisle seat in the back where they can run screaming from the room if this goes embarrassingly wrong, when suddenly the blackness is cut by a spotlight illuminating a character that they had invented out of their brain, who walks out onto the stage, looks out into the audience, and says their first line, and the audience laughs. And then another character they had invented walks out onto the stage in a spotlight and says their first line, and the audience laughs. And there in that warm auditorium, this author, this writer is hit with this even warmer feeling of, oh my God, I know what I want to do with my life. Now, nowhere in this essay did they say, I'm going to be a Tony-winning playwright and you better take me into your college or somebody else is going to, I'll donate all my money there. But you kind of get that idea. Notice how they sort of slipped in the impressive things into just the narrative, into the story. They taught themselves playwriting between freshman and sophomore year of the summer. Who does that? Most other people are just like looking at dog memes on their phone, and this person's reading books about playwriting. I don't know if you noticed this, it was sort of implied, not even stated. Their play as a sophomore was selected, presumably against a bunch of sophomore, juniors, and seniors by this really picky theater director. And they also mentioned at the end that they have another one that they did at the end of junior year that was produced, and they're working on their one for senior year. Has anybody at the school ever done 3 plays before? My gosh, this is like Neil Simon here. But they didn't have to make a big deal out of that because they told the story that gives you that idea. It's always better if you can make your boss think your proposal was their idea. So they're like, yeah, that was a great idea I thought of. Let's do that. Let's admit this kid. That's what you're going for with these types of ideas. You don't say what you're going to do. You show what you already did and let them fill in the blanks. Story number 2. This one, less creative. I know that's like, I'm not into creative stuff. I'm into like science and, reading. Mock trial, real trial. This other kid was looking for an extracurricular activity and joined mock trial. I don't know if you guys have that at your school, but it's like Model UN. You're debating in sort of a fake trial settings. Like here they were doing big grandiose things like, hi, here's how we're going to cure starvation in Africa, or here's how we're going to end global warming, and stuff that's not really what you do in a court of law usually. But anyway, that was the idea of it. This kid didn't join for any noble or high-minded reason. They just needed an extracurricular activity for their resume, and their dad said, well, you really like to argue a lot, so why don't you do that for your extracurricular activity? And so they joined mock trial. Had some success. The team placed well in a couple of tournaments, and the student liked it and hung around for 3 years. At the end of junior year, the coach of the team takes the kid aside and says, listen, you've been with the team now for 3 years. Would you consider being the captain next year? And the kid says, boy, coach, I'm really honored, but I got to be honest. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do it next year. I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. I mean, maybe I do, but it seems like none of the stuff we're doing has anything to do with being a lawyer. Like we're just talking about, grandiose ideas here. Where's the law part of this? Coach says, I get it. Listen, I got a friend who's an attorney who's always trying cases over at the Torrance courthouse. You guys don't have school on Friday. Court's in session. Why don't you go down to the courthouse and just like sit in on a day of trials and see if these real trials teach you anything about mock trials? So the kid's like, hey, all right, I don't have anything going on Friday. It's going to rain. It's almost like he didn't take the initiative here. He kind of got pushed into this thing that not everybody would do, but he still ended up doing something that people wouldn't do. It's even better if you take the initiative, if it was his idea, but he was like, but it wasn't my idea. My coach said do this, so I did. Okay, genuineness and honesty is good too. Anyway, he sits there through an entire day of court trials. And I got to tell you, this is not Law and Order. This is not A Few Good Men. This is not, court TV. Well, court TV is pretty mundane also, but this is like a guy fighting a parking ticket. This is like a dad arguing for like 1 additional day per month of custody over his kids. This is like the most interesting case of the day was this girl had hit somebody, gotten in a fight at a bar and hit somebody with a bottle, and they might have to spend a week in jail. Anyway, so he's watching all this, and this is not like on TV. Like the lawyers are stumbling over their words and dropping their notes all over the floor, and like nobody can hear what anybody's saying, and everything takes a really long time. And his first reaction is like, oh my God, this is so boring. Like, oh, this is excruciating to watch. But this is real. Like, these are people's real lives. I mean, who cares about a parking ticket? But although it might not seem like a big idea to you or I, that 1 month, 1 day of custody a month for a kid, like it's probably a big deal to that dad and to those kids. And maybe, you know, going to jail for a week, whatever, I'm tough, I could survive a week in the clink. But that's like going to be a permanent black mark on this girl's record. Like she's going to lose her job. This might change her life in potentially a really terrible way. It was real. And so he went back to the coach and he said, all right, I'll do it. I'll be the captain next year, but only if we can do a parking ticket trial. So once again, you get this weird person doing something that like not everybody would do. This wasn't even that impressive. They didn't really do anything that won an award. They just did something that not everybody would think of, and it changed, you know, their course towards their career. A lot of these essays have something to do with what you might want to do for a living. It doesn't have to be, but think of what you have done in your life that maybe not everybody has had a chance to do or been able to do that's, I don't know, kind of impressive. What does that suggest about what you might do? And see if you can make them think it's their idea. Approach number 2, be different. You don't have to do the most impressive route. That is just one option, one way you can go. A second way you can go is to try to convey that you are different than all of the other high-scoring, hard-working, good grade-getting students out there. Colleges don't just want butts in chairs. They want lots of different types of students. They want diversity. And here, I don't just mean like ethnic or religious diversity, although that could be partly, you know, what's unique about you. It could just be that you have, I don't know, you have an extra finger on one hand. You play the oboe. Your extra finger makes you extra good at playing the oboe. You're a one-legged albino lumberjack from Wyoming. Wow, that's low percentile there. That's quite unique. So start with the thing that's different about you. But that is not good enough to make a good essay all by itself. Now that can be a start. You know, if I have a choice between somebody who's, you know, just writing about being in Cub Scouts, but they're a one-legged albino lumberjack versus somebody who's just like your average kid from the suburbs. I guess a slight preference towards the weird kid, but like, it's not weird in a good way. But that's not ultimately what these are about, but that's a good place to start. What these are about is, so what perspective or what thing, what realization has that different background given you? How have you become wiser about life or become what we say a better college student because of this thing? So once again, 2 examples that show better than I can possibly explain. The one of these essays that was actually titled, I think, was this essay called 50% Russia, 50% Redondo. So this was a kid who was from Russia originally. He had moved to Redondo Beach when he was 9, which is why 50% of his life was in Russia, 50% in Redondo. I think he just liked the fractional parallelism of that. In any case, this student was like, hey, I'll just write about that. Like, how many people that go to Redondo Union or go to Miracosta have, you know, moved from Moscow? I'll just write about that. Okay, fine. Like, sure, that does set you apart a little bit. But his first draft of his essay was not that great. It was just, you know, I moved here, and his first sentence, I think, was, as I stepped off the plane at LAX, sounds like a Miley Cyrus song, and saw my first ever palm tree, I realized, wow, I'm not in Moscow anymore. I mean, that's a good start. But after that, he just sort of wrote a essay about how, you know, I wanted to fit in and I was different. And then slowly I learned the customs and I began to assimilate myself into you know, South Bay culture. Yay, hurrah. Okay, that's mediocre. Let's do a little bit better than that. What we got to after we talked about it a little bit is I tried to remind him that, listen, I know you think you're the only kid who's ever moved from Moscow. You aren't. Also, like, Moscow's not any better or worse a place to move from than any of the other cities across the entire world that kids are moving to and from all the time. There are tons of kids in their stack who have moved. What if you are in a pile of other kids with a similar experience? Why does your essay stand out from theirs? So usually the way to go with this is you start with the thing that's a little different about you. I'm Jewish, or I am left-handed, or I have a ridiculous sweating problem and my armpits are like carrying around 2 mops and headlocks. Okay, so what is it about that experience that makes you a better college student? But also, what's different about your experience than somebody else who went through the same thing? This student, as we said, wanted to fit in, and he did. And that's not the end of his essay. That's actually the midpoint of his essay. Because after he finally fit in and, had new friends and stuff, stopped wearing the old Russian gear, learned to speak without an accent and so forth, one Sunday afternoon, his grandma called. His grandmother, who still lives in Moscow and doesn't speak a word of English, and just starts blah, 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 blah on the phone 1,000,000 miles an hour, yelling at him in Russian. And he realizes to his horror that, oh my God, I don't know what my grandma is saying. He had lost his fluency in Russia. And he realized right then that, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted. This isn't who I am. And he realized something about assimilation at that moment. That assimilation, yes, is partly about you changing yourself to fit into your new environment, but it's also about changing your environment a little bit to fit in with you. And so he started a Russian club at his school. He started wearing some of his old fashion again and briefly had a little shoe fad of this Russian shoe brand to catch on at his school. And he made sure that he talked to his grandma every Sunday so that he could keep his fluency up. Again, you start with what's different about you, and that's a good place to, differentiate yourself a little bit. But if a school is just looking for more Russian kids to fill some quota, you're already in. But chances are they're not. Chances are they have 100 Russian kids and they can give spots to like 20 of them. So how does your essay stand out amidst those people? That's another way that you can show, yeah, I'm different, I'm interesting, but this is why that makes me a better person, a better college student. Second example, the twin who untwinned. This girl was a pretty solid student, very high grades, good test scores. She wanted to go to UCSB, that was your dream school. And as you may know, it is difficult to get into that school. They don't accept that many people. And so she was trying to get in and she figured she would just use her cheat code and she'd say, I got a great essay topic. I'm a twin. I have an identical twin sister. I'll just write about that. Only 3% of people are twins, piece of cake. Okay, but somehow, because of the magic of Google, we were able to determine that in the previous year, there had been 97 twins who had applied to UCSB, and they only let in 15 of them. Oh no, and they all wrote about being a twin. Like, what else do you write about when you're a twin? Apologies if any of you guys are twins. But you were probably thinking that same thing. Any case, she had to go a bit deeper, as we all do with this. And so I said, well, what was your specific twin experience? Do you know any other twins? What was different about your experience than those? So her and her sister had kind of an interesting shakedown. Basically, so they were like identical when they were little. They went to the same little tiny elementary school and the same middle school that had like 200 kids in it, and they had all the same classes, they did all the same activities, they had all the same friends. Their mom even obnoxiously dressed them the same. But then something weird happened when they got to puberty. Now, apparently this happens with twins sometimes, but the two identical twins began to diverge. Her sister got a little taller, her hair got a little darker, her sister's eyes even changed color, which is sounds like a very X-Men thing to happen, but apparently that happens with twins sometimes. The sister became a little more athletically minded, she became a little more academically minded, and they still looked like sisters, but maybe not even like twins that much anymore. And then they got to their first day of 9th grade at the 2,000 person high school they were going to be attending, as opposed to the tiny little middle school. And as she sat with their sister in the quad looking at their schedules, they realized they didn't have any classes together. And there's this really interesting moment as her sister walks away across the quad from her, like walks away from her for the first time, kind of. And she realizes, she starts her essay with, everybody always wonders what it would be like to be a twin. I always wondered what it would be like not to be one. And on the first day of freshman year, I found out. She wrote her essay about individuality, about how nobody understands individuality as well as she does, because for 15 years, she wasn't one. She was just a copy of somebody else. So take that experience that's a little bit different about you, and see then how it would be different from other people who had the same one. Oh, okay, I'm in marching band. A lot of people in marching band. I play the oboe in marching band. A lot of people do that too. But here's my specific take on that. I learned to play the oboe underwater. Okay, interesting. Go on. What? Why? Or, I both do solo performance and in a marching band, and I love how you get a sense of both sides of music, how one is a group enterprise and the other is individual. Okay, cool. Explore those, less common connections between ideas that help show that maybe, if you're not directly a better college student, you have more wisdom and you go a little further than this. Sometimes these ideas also will relate directly to your what you want to study. I learned that I wanted to be a paramedic because I was interested in surfing, because both things are about waiting patiently for that one moment of action and adrenaline, and that's what I live for. Oh, interesting. So we start with surfing, but then okay, but how does that lead somewhere? Start with that as point A, find point B, and then you've got yourself a good essay. Approach number 3, be interesting. Guys, they have to read a lot of these. So there is something to be said for just writing the craziest essay that you can come up with. The most interesting, the most sad, the most touching, the most dramatic, whatever fits your style. But again, don't use a gimmick that isn't you. I want to write a sob story essay because I heard those get people into places. They don't. I'll go into that in a minute. But okay, well, nothing bad has ever happened to me. I know, I'll write about my hamster dying. Is it going to be funny? Because don't write that one as a sad one, because, first of all, give me a break. But also, this is going to get real dark here for a second, but what if your sob story essay about your hamster dying and how you couldn't go to first grade for a week gets into the pile right underneath the kid who wrote about both their parents dying in a car accident? Oh, God. They are not going to let anybody in based on a sob story. They aren't going to let you in because your essay was really funny. They're going to let you in because that essay made them remember you and also maybe hid some substance that you could sneak in. So we are looking to still have a little substance with these. But sometimes you want to start your brainstorming by just saying, what's the craziest story I got? What's the wildest thing that's ever happened to me? Could that go anywhere with this? So you always want to try to make any of these essay examples interesting. Obviously, you don't want to write a boring essay, even if you aren't doing this explicitly for your approach, but you always want to tell stories. You want to use examples. Start with a hook. The worn out cliche example is pop went my Achilles tendon as my soccer career ended. They've read so many of those, they roll their eyes a little bit, but an essay starting with a quote or a noise of your joint exploding or a car accident. Or I had one kid who, I don't even remember how he tied in the depth of this, but he read about I was about to take my bar mitzvah when, unbeknownst to me, 6 missiles were streaking towards my location. And he had gotten his bar mitzvah in the Middle East, and there's a missile strike in the city that he was in. And I still remember that essay now, and this was 5 years ago. I don't even remember why this kid was impressive, but I do remember that essay. So sometimes this is one way you can go too, just what's the most interesting story that you got? I'll tell you a couple stories about this one, and then I'll hit this with the caveats. First story is a story about a kid named Justin, who had this uncle who was outdoorsman extreme. Justin's uncle was Chuck Norris, Bear Grylls, Paul Bunyan, outdoorsman. He could grate cheese with his beard. He taught Justin how to do everything outdoorsy, how to surf, how to camp, how to hang a bear bag, how to start a fire with only 2 toothpicks and a stern glare. Jesse's uncle obviously meant a lot to him, or Justin's uncle. Justin's uncle has a stroke. And unfortunately, the stroke leaves the uncle unable to do much of anything. Instead of hunting and camping and surfing, now he's confined to a wheelchair in his room. And Justin says, I can't go out like that. That's not good. I gotta do something. I gotta find a way to fix this. And, he can't cure what is wrong with his uncle, but he helps get a wheelchair ramp installed in the uncle's house so that he can go outside again. He helps get a wheelchair with big, fat, inflatable tires so he can go out onto the beach again. Even if he can't surf, he can at least be near the surfers. Even helps rent a handicap accessible van so that his uncle gets to go camping one last time. And the story doesn't have a happy ending. The uncle dies. But amidst all of Justin's sorrow over losing somebody he was so close to, he also realizes that his uncle taught him one last lesson, that he really liked helping people. And that was why he wanted to go into medicine. So these essays, obviously can have a certain emotional impact, and that's good. That helps them remember you. But of course, you're planting something else. This story is, surprisingly also sort of a Be Impressive essay. Turns out that I think Justin's going to actually make a pretty good doctor, because when all the other kids are like going home after 2 consecutive overnighters of studying for their orgo final, Justin's still going to be there in the library. He's going to do it for his uncle. So he liked helping people, and he hopes that he can one day, see that look in his eyes, or in his uncle's eyes when he got to go camping one last time, maybe in somebody else's eyes when Justin was able to help them. So sometimes a story that has tragedy in it or has a touching aspect can be really effective. They are not just going to admit you for the sob story aspect. They are horrible, calloused people. No, they're not horrible people. They've just read so many of these that, it's like if you watched horror movies all day and all night, you're not going to be that impacted by them anymore. You're going to be like, okay, next. It's a business to them. That doesn't mean that they don't have any soul, and you can't still unearth that soul, especially if you compare it with something with a bit of substance as well. Perhaps the opposite of the Justin's uncle idea is another essay called the basement essay. Thanks, Grace. Good to see you too. Feel free to see the rest of it on the recording later if you want. So the basement essay was written by this kid who had 2 brothers, and they were all like big rowdy. I think they all played high school football. The younger 2 actually went on to play college football. The older one who's writing this essay didn't, but certainly it was a rowdy atmosphere, to say the least. These guys would wrestle, they would fight, they would play football in the living room and just basically break everything. Finally, their parents got so fed up that they moved houses to this new, larger house that had a basement, which was this big, just rec room with nothing in it. And they basically took the kids and they said, okay, listen, you monsters. Apparently, we cannot stop you from fighting, from breaking things. So here is the deal. You get the basement. We're not going to put any furniture down here. We're not going to put anything down here. You do whatever you want. We're not even going to come down here. You can do whatever you want down here. But if you ever fight in any other part of the house again, we're going to lock you in the trunk of the car for the weekend. So this basement very quickly became like Lord of the Flies, gladiator arena, like a Hunger Games style anarchy pit where the neighborhood kids would come over and they would just play all these demented games. Like the oldest brother's writing this, basically it's like, my job was basically the game maker. I would design these thinly veiled excuses to beat the snot out of my 2 younger brothers. They had this game called Hernier, where it was like hernia with an R. They would block up all the windows with pillows. And so it was pitch black in here and nobody could see anything. And then when they would run through the room swinging hockey sticks. And when you hit somebody, it made a different sound, of course, than when a hockey stick hits the wall. So everybody else would know where to throw their hockey sticks. You'd also yell Hernier as a verbal beacon for others to join the fray. And, they would usually play this game until someone lost a tooth or something. They had another game where the youngest brother's name was Alex. And the only rule or anything to the game was that you would hit Alex with pillows in the head and neck until he fell down. And the game was titled Hit Alex with Pillows in the Head and Neck until he fell down. And then Alex didn't particularly like this game, but everybody else thought it was a blast. Anyway, you're reading the story of people's heads going through plywood and you're like, what is wrong with this person? Like, what is this essay that I'm reading? But I kind of want to hang out with this guy. Like, hey, You've read 5 Eagle Scout essays in a row. Read this one when you need a break. If they're passing your essay around, if they're like telling their husband or wife about it when they go home at the end of the day, be like, how was work? I read 6,000 essays and I want to blow my brains out, but this one stuck with me. I mean, that's not a bad thing. So there's something to be said for just really going for it, especially if this is your style. You know, if you're a creative, wild person, you've got a theatrical side to you, like this can really break the monotony of some of the essays they read. Once again, as a backup, you might want to try to layer some substance into these. There are some counselors who don't love this style of essay, especially colleges who like take themselves very seriously, or sometimes the UCs are like, I don't know. I think I was saying before, I had a student not get into a bunch of schools. They really leaned hard into the interesting approach, and I liked their essays. You know, they wrote about writing a sci-fi novel in their head while they jogged. They wrote about trying every type of smoothie in Los Angeles. But I don't know if they had enough of like some other flavors in there too. And they might have just gotten somebody on a bad day who read their essays and said, these essays are all fluff and no substance. I'm going to just reject them from all the schools. Also, they were applying to only the really hard to get into UCs. They would have got into Merced. In any case, do keep that in mind. This sometimes can be the high risk, high reward one, where if you already think you have a pretty good chance of getting into a school, maybe you don't go for a super crazy one. But then again, if you got only a long shot at a school, this is the one that gets people into schools that they shouldn't have gotten into. Like these are the viral ones, like the girl who wrote their essay on a Papa John's pizza lid in Sharpie and sent that in instead of, boringly submitting it as a digital submission. One of my favorite old stories of this also demonstrates how you do have to make sure that you are being you in these essays as well. Don't steal a gimmick that isn't you. I had it wasn't my girl, it was another girl that I heard of, who wrote her essay in backwards handwriting, and you had to read it in a mirror, which is a very interesting idea. And, this was like a famous one. She got in all these Ivy League schools and all these fancy colleges and stuff. And then, of course, there were a whole bunch of copycats the next year who like tried the same thing and didn't have any success. And they were like, well, how come that girl did it? And whatever. Well, she was the first. But also, what you didn't always hear in that story was what she wrote her essay about, which was about overcoming her struggle with dyslexia. Oh, okay. So that's her essay. That's not my essay. I can't do that one. And that's what I mean by like making sure that this does, no matter what approach you pick, reflect you. You got to do what is you. And so again, I've told you 6 stories here. Hopefully, some of them were interesting or inspired you to do something, but don't, just because an essay was good doesn't mean you need to do it. Don't get intimidated by, I'll never be able to write that. You don't have to. You shouldn't do that one. That's not you. Now, I'm not here to tell you which of these 3 approaches is going to work the best for you. I have seen all of them be bad when they're not working right, and I've seen all of them get kids into amazing schools that they probably wouldn't have gotten into otherwise. You got to figure out what fits you. I would submit, though, that if your essay is none of these, that if it doesn't make you seem very impressive, that it doesn't make you seem different than anybody else in that giant stack of papers they have, like literally they will read 400 or 500 of these in a long weekend sometimes. And if it's not particularly interesting to read, then why are you writing it? What is it doing? It's not impressive, it's not different, it's not interesting. Now, I'm not saying you need to change your whole idea. And here's the part where some people's souls are breaking because they're like, oh no, I spent all this time writing this essay for AP English and I don't think I can even use it now because it's not any of these things. Well, maybe. I mean, just because you spend a lot of time on it, something doesn't mean it's good. But, to be less mean, maybe you just need to rethink it a little bit. Maybe it is one of these. You just didn't focus on the right aspect. Maybe with a good, solid rewrite, it could work. So think about these approaches and what reflects your style. And that will allow you to keep in mind what they're looking for while still doing what essays are supposed to be for, representing who you are and finding your place at the puzzle that you're the piece of. Okay, I already talked about the COVID stuff, so I don't think I need to discuss this anymore. Again, if you're going to use pandemic as a backdrop, fine, but do make sure it's one of the 3 approaches. Where do I go from here? And we're going to do Q&A here in a second to answer any questions I haven't yet covered. But what I would like you guys to do next is in this packet, and once again, my email is in there. I can send it to you if you like. Fill out this application essay brainstorm sheet. Now, you don't have to like write a long, paragraph long answer for each one of these. You may not even have to write that much down at all. But what this list is a list of questions, some of which lead more obviously towards it would be interesting, be different, or be impressive ideas than others. But if you honestly spend 30 seconds or a minute honestly trying to answer each of these questions and saying, okay, what am I going to do in college that's going to be impressive? Well, I think I'm going to probably start a Latino dance organization. Okay, well, how did I become interested in that? Oh yeah, I already started a dance club with my friends, or I started a Spanish club at my school. What's the thing that led to that? So again, go into the past to show about the future. What are you really good at? Okay, fine, but how did you get good at it? What was the moment you realized you were good? Answer the questions, all of them on this page, even if it's just into a voice recorder or something, and you will have a few more ideas for your essays. Take whatever work you've already done. Maybe you already wrote a draft for your English class. Maybe you brainstormed a couple of other ideas when you were bored on a car ride. We get to do car rides again, guys, yay. But maybe you only got 3 ideas. You're not ready. You need like a whole bunch. I want you to go and think of like 8 or 10 examples, run those by people, narrow them down to your favorite 4, then match them to the UC prompts. Don't worry about the prompts yet. Then figure out which one of those is working the best, apply it to your Common App, etc. We're also here to help, of course. We have one-on-one essay consulting. I also teach a summer essay class that's in the handout here that actually starts up on June 13th here in 2 Sundays. No, 1 more Sunday, so 10 days from now. This workshop meets on Sundays, and basically you bang out all 4 of your UC application essays and your longer Common App essay, and not just like drafts, like polished versions with a bunch of feedback from me and from others and so forth. So this is a way that you can just like put a bullet in this summer and get this done before you have to go back to school and not have to worry about it. But you don't necessarily need me. You can also just get feedback through these steps from friends, from colleagues, from parents, from whomever. If you want to enlist me to, or one of my essay experts to take a look like at your essay in the later stages, just do a little bit, whatever you need. We're happy to help. Our info is here. Our website also is, oh, sorry, there's my children all covered in beans. Sorry. So here's our website, pjtestprep.com. Like I said, there are also another version of this workshop coming up on the 19th. We're doing an SAT one this weekend. So this is pjtestprep.com. Let me type this in here. This is where all the free ones are. Oops, I'm supposed to send that to everybody. And we also are having a discount on the essay class, which is here, of $40 off this week before Saturday. So if you are looking at doing any classes, like an essay class or an SAT class over the summer or something like that, if you go to this link that I will type in the chat here, you can actually get a discount here prior to this weekend. There it is. In any case, this is not about us, though. This is about you guys. And so I wanted to open this up to any questions that you guys have of anything I did not yet cover about these. Feel free to just say it, type it in the chat, let me know. Obviously, colleges are looking at these more this year than before because grades are weird with so much Zoom school, and SAT scores are optional or not even looked at. No matter what, do take this seriously. But is there anything that I can answer that I haven't already, you guys? By the way, you don't have to answer all the questions on this brainstorm sheet. give each one a shot, but sometimes you'd be like, I don't know, nothing touching has ever happened in my life. There is not an essay for Cal States, was the question. Cal States are very simple in terms of their applications. You submit usually you submit your grades and your SAT scores. They are test optional. They'll probably go test blind like the UCs at some point. So it's basically just your grades. So if you ever got an A-, you can say goodbye to Cal Poly. Harsh. Well, I mean, what else is there these days? They aren't looking at your essays. You don't have to submit any of them for that. But there are some Cal States that have programs like an engineering program that might require an essay. There might be a scholarship or an honors college that does. So check on that specific program's requirement, but in general, they don't. They like to keep things really straightforward. The essays, the application processes for the Cal States are very simple. I will send the recording of this through the counselors, and they can forward it along. So just contact them if they don't send it out. Question, what advice do you have for introverts? Oh man, I'm half an introvert. Like sometimes when I get in front of a room, I like to, talk and joke, but I like to spend most of the rest of my time alone. I think being introverted is awesome for college application essays because accessing other people is obviously very important in our world, but there are so many things that aren't other people that fascinate us and that can make great essay topics. I read a really awesome essay last year by a girl who was kind of introverted. Her two passions were science. She wanted to get into medicine and swimming. And she loved swimming because you could just like be at peace in the ocean and, just like cut through the waves and not hear anything. But she wanted to push herself, so she became a swim teacher. And it was really hard for her at first, but it taught her a lot about how, like with swimming, just like with medicine, there is a technique, there's a science to it, but there's also a chaos, an unpredictability of how any individual kid is going to like react to the choppy ocean. And so by teaching swimming lessons, she got out of her shell a little bit. This wasn't some like, oh, here's how I became social. She just learned something else about her beliefs. So go inside, think about your interests. A really common cool essay topic is to take two different interests that aren't really that common or that united apparently and find out that they have some cool connection. So I would write down a list of like the things that fascinate you and see if any of them pair up. What is the main purpose of a college essay? Yes, it is to show the reader who you are. But like, what does that mean? Is this college counselor going to become your friend? Are they going to date you? I mean, not if they don't want to get fired. They are trying to see if you are a good fit for their school. Now, what does that mean? Well, kind of it comes down to those three topics. Like, man, this kid is going to smash it. This kid's going to make $1 billion as a lawyer. I better admit them. Wow, this kid really fills out our diversity on campus because we don't have any other one-legged albino lumberjacks. Or, man, this guy's just fascinating. Like, what an interesting idea. He wrote this really cool essay about a stick of chapstick. This one kid famously in this essay book wrote about how they do all their best thinking on the toilet. What does that kid add to campus? Well, it's just somebody who's interesting. So it can be, hey, I'm really well-rounded, but it also can be, I'm super focused on this one thing, because colleges don't necessarily need well-rounded students. They want a well-rounded student body. So don't be afraid to focus on that. For those of you who are ducking out, thank you guys for this. I have a couple of other questions I'm going to answer, so you can stick around if you want and answer these. But I do want to thank all of you for being here. Again, I'm Paul Jury. We are PJ Test Prep. Again, look up my information if you have any questions, or you can hit that link if you want to sign up for something. But I'm here if you guys have any questions about anything. What other questions do we have? Are there topics such as environmental sustainability or LGBTQ that have become overused? Overused is always tricky because, yeah, they definitely get topics that just get beaten to death. Like the sports hero essay is commonly maligned as like, don't ever write this essay because everybody writes about how I won the big soccer game or whatever. Does that mean that like no one could ever write a sports essay? I mean, sports movies are totally cliche and overdone, but can no one ever make a sports movie again? Of course you can if it's well executed. I wouldn't limit yourself because you heard that, oh, too many people are writing about LGBTQ stuff this year. How do you know? Maybe no one's writing about it this year because everybody heard they were doing it last year. You can't control that. You have no control over whether you're going to get into a giant pile of environmental sustainability essays or not. Do assume that you will, though, and write your environmental sustainability essay with that in mind. How does mine stand out amidst the other ones? Yes, we're getting a lot of, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to change this broken world we live in because our world is especially broken right now. But those essays can be lame too if they don't actually talk about having done anything, or they don't keep in mind that, they're going to doubt whether you're actually going to do it. So give me some unique perspective. So that's a roundabout way, Michael, of answering that question. I hope that's okay, but don't be scared of a topic. Just be aware of, if you think it does sound like a really overused one, that you're going to have to maybe work a little harder to make it stand out. And there is something to be said for, could I just start with a topic that's already kind of unique and most people haven't done? Maybe it's easier to execute that one. Just keep that in mind. But if you're into environmental sustainability among the LGBT community, well, you don't have a choice but to write about that if that's who you are. Other questions, anyone? Well, if not, team, it has been a pleasure. Again, Paul Drury here. I'm here if you need me. We're PJ Test Prep, and just let us know what else we can do to help you guys. Thank you. Have a good one.
Mr. Drury, can I ask you a few questions?
Sure thing, Clay. What's up?
So, I like what you've been.
Oh, you went mute there for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It chopped out for a second.
Yeah, I like what you've been saying, but some of it has felt a little conflicting. Like, I don't understand what you mean. Like, you're highlighting upon these people who have like these super out of the box ideas and whatnot, but if you're just following the prompt and you're like expressing your certain strengths and your interests, would you like be like super negatively impacted in your college acceptance?
Well, it depends on what you mean by that. I usually recommend coming up with your ideas first and then matching them back to the prompt afterwards, to both make sure that it's actually a topic you want to write about, but also to make sure that it's maybe not just like everybody who does simply answer the question. Now, am I saying that you should avoid answering their question in the prompt? No, the opposite of that. You do want to make sure that you come around to answering their prompt at some point, in case they're like, this kid didn't answer the prompt and I'm a stickler for the rules and I hate that. But they're pretty flexible. I mean, I won't say this is true of everybody, but like I've definitely had some college readers who are like, we don't even care what prompt it is. We don't even read the prompts. I'd say that's less true at the UCs, where they a little bit more want you to answer it. But start with your idea first and then conform it to the essay rather than the other way around. This is going to be a weird analogy, but it's a little like dating. I heard that girls like guys with abs and also who are sensitive. And so I'm going to like go do sit-ups in public and cry. Nah, man, just be you. Well, but who I am isn't interesting to any of them. Well, it's interesting to some of them. You just have to figure out the best version of you. And so I would just write down like 10 ideas that you'd want to write about. And then ask yourself, is this more like of an impressive one? Is this more of an interesting one? Or is this more of a be different one? And then go back to the prompts and saying, and would this answer any of their prompts? Their prompts are so varied that like there's no idea that you can come up with that doesn't fit any of their prompts.
Okay, so second one would be like what you said about the 10 interesting things about yourself. Would it be smart to like
Hold on, sorry, you ducked out again with your audio.
Would it be smart to look at the college's pattern of acceptance, as in like who they usually accept, and maybe you could like highlight upon certain things you've done to make yourself look more appealing?
I mean, To some extent. I always worry about chasing trends, because if you're like, oh, last year a lot of kids wrote about saving the oceans and they got into UCLA. Well, what do you think everybody else is going to write about this year? Last year's successful essay often becomes this year's cliche essay. Now, if you look for that for general guidance, that can be fine. I would still just write down things that you have done or things that are interesting about you that aren't like everybody else first, and then maybe go read those essays and say, oh, I see, the ones where they really seem to talk about what they're going to then go and do and be very specific about like the course of action I'm going to take in college or in a career, those seem to work really well for this school. So why don't I take this essay about starting a Help the Elderly club, and why don't I spend some time talking about what I might do with that in college, because it seems like that's what they're doing. But if you just like ape the stuff that you read about online, your essay is by definition going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Imitative of those.
Okay, but I like what you're saying. So you could also write about stuff that is more centered around a major or like a choice of study.
Yeah.
You get that too?
Yes, absolutely. If you think you might know what you might major in, or even if you're like, I don't know exactly what, but I like science or I like math or I like creativity, you can include a little bit about what you might do with that. But I'd also love to hear, how did you become interested in that? Do you have any observations about a particular line of work that maybe not everybody would think of? Like the girl who wrote about wanting to be a doctor, who wrote about how being a doctor is like half science and control and half chaos and unpredictability. Like that's a cool observation that makes me think, oh, this girl's gonna be a better doctor than like somebody else who just says, I just like medicine because I took a science class one time and I liked it.
Okay, I got you. All right, well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Clay. Hope that helps. Anybody else with questions? All right. Well, you're always welcome to email me, you guys. I appreciate the attention, and let me know if there's anything else I can do to help. Thank you, guys.
Oh, I did have a question.
Liam, yeah, what's up?
So for colleges that have, I know a lot of colleges have like a supplemental essays with math, like one big college I want to go to is Michigan, and they have like a YUM question.
Yes.
About like why you want to, and talk about like different senior like projects and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And one is like, I'm sure like talking about your major. So
Yeah.
would it be better, like if you're applying to more of those kinds of schools, would it be better to avoid the topic of what you want to study, or is it okay to still like leave it in there?
Well, that's a good point. We didn't have time to get into the specific supplement essay where they're like, why this school? Pro tip on that one, they're never looking for you to just like kiss the school's butt and be like, because Michigan's so great and I want to watch Wolverine football games and like, I love the campus. Like anybody can write that. They want to hear about you. So like start by talking about yourself. Like, I used to go on vacations in, the boundary waters of northern Minnesota in the winter with my grandfather. I also have always loved psychology ever since I took AP Psych 10th grade year. So when I found that Michigan has one of the top rated psychology programs, I knew it was the perfect fit for me. You're basically secretly saying I'm a perfect fit for you. So that's what they want to hear in those essays. Your question though was, if they're going to ask me later specifically about my major, and so they're going to hear about that, does that mean that I should avoid talking about my major for my other like main Common App essay? Maybe. I wouldn't want you to like not do the topic that you really want to write about just because you're worried it might be a little redundant with their other essay. You can probably find a way to adapt both to get them substantially away from each other. That being said, if there is something that's not necessarily career related that you wanted to talk about in your other essay, or it was like a tiebreaker, maybe you would lean towards, here's this essay that's just about my observations about the world and not necessarily related to what I'm going to major in. But you can also like hit on what you love about, like what's your potential field of study? What are we talking about here?
I want to do business and like maybe a minor in biology, so biology and business.
Okay, so like maybe you could talk about what you love about biology and business more in the Common App essay, and then you get into like, okay, specifically, what am I going to do with it at Michigan or beyond? So that wouldn't be a problem. It would be almost like a sequel. You know, you're like, part A of my essay is like how I fell in love, and then part B is like what I'm going to do with it. So if you thought about it that way, they wouldn't be that redundant. But if there's a big other aspect of your life that you're just not writing about, you know, maybe that would be something to include. If you're also a world-class saxophonist, you know, maybe you go that way and talk about how saxophone is like business in your one essay, and then you're like, okay, but here's what I'm going to do on campus in your other essay.
Okay. All right, cool.
So,
That makes a lot more sense. Thank you. I appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you, guys. Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Aiden. Race, are you still there? Okay, I'm going to assume you've wandered away. Bye, everybody.